This is Indian Country Today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. Apache stronghold leader and former San Carlos Apache chairman, Wensler Noisy Sr., and granddaughter Nayland Pike testified Wednesday about the religious importance of Oak Flat. The group sued the U.S. Forest Service for turning over Oak Flat to Resolution Copper, a joint venture of global mining companies Rio Tinto and BHP. The group is seeking an injunction to stop the land transfer until the courts determine who has rights to that land and whether mining would infringe on Apache's religious practices. U.S. District Court Judge Stephen Logan said he would rule on February 12th. The Senate Indian Affairs Committee has new leadership. The Senate is now divided equally, 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans, and in a power-sharing arrangement, Democrats will control the chamber. On Wednesday, the new chairman, Hawaii's Brian Schatz, met with President Joe Biden to discuss COVID-19 relief for Native communities in Hawaii and across the country. Schatz also said Biden is committed to providing robust funding for Native communities. On Capitol Hill, the Navajo Nation has purchased an office, joining a handful of federally recognized tribes with a presence in Washington. At the end of January, 16 of 24 council members voted in favor of the $4.8 million purchase, a two-thirds vote that was necessary because the legislation drew from funding from the principal of the nation's Land Acquisition Trust Fund. The property includes a 161-year-old home, along with a detached building located at 11 D Street Southeast, directly behind the U.S. House of Representatives building. The Kansas City Chiefs will arrive in Tampa, Florida this week as the defending Super Bowl champions. Ahead of the kickoff for Super Bowl 55 on Sunday, a local group plans to stage a protest at Raymond James Stadium to urge the team to ditch the Chiefs' name out of respect for Native American people. The St. Petersburg-based Florida Indigenous Rights and Environmental Equality, or FIRE, wants to call attention to how hurtful the team's name is to Indigenous people, who see their culture and spirituality appropriated. As Indian Country Today's Vincent Schilling reported last year, the team was named in honor of former Kansas City Mayor H. Roe Bartle. Bartle was a non-native man who dressed up in fake war bonnets and created Boy Scout camps in which scouts also dressed as Indians. Bartle was known by the nickname Chief, and he's the history behind the NFL's team name. Super Bowl weekend has another meaning for baseball fans, and that is that spring training is days away. In the time of coronavirus, there are concerns about when and how to do that safely. The Salt River Pima Maricopa community in Arizona owns Salt River Fields and hosts spring training for the Arizona Diamondbacks and Colorado Rockies. And it looks like pitchers and catchers are still ready to report for work this month. Indian Country Today's Carina Dominguez has the story.
Spring training facilities are closed, but pitchers and catchers are still set to report in just 2 weeks, despite the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community asking to push that date back. The tribe and cities from the greater Phoenix area host spring training games in the Cactus League. Tribal and city officials signed a letter last week requesting games be delayed a month due to the COVID-19 infection rates in Arizona. Warren Ray with Salt River Fields says the tribe showed solidarity with municipalities, and the facility will be following public health guidelines.
We've lost many people. It's been tragic with COVID-19. We make sure to shield up and mask up and to follow all the guidelines the CDC provides.
The president of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, Martin Javier, signed the letter along with 8 mayors that read, "In view of the current state of the pandemic in Maricopa County, we believe it is wise to delay the start of spring training to allow for the situation to improve here." The infection rate in Phoenix is trending downward for now. Major League Baseball suggested delaying the start of spring training and reducing the regular season, but they wanted to expand the postseason. Spring training games are set to start on February 27th.
It gets me excited. I'm happy to get together with the employees that are seasonal and to get my staff ready and going and trained up and creating the best customer service for all of our fans that enter our gates and get ready for baseball to start.
The Cactus League Task Force is suggesting limited ticket sales, pod seating, and contactless transactions. In Scottsdale, Arizona, Carina Dominguez, Indian Country Today.
That's the news from Indian Country Today. I'm Mark Trahant. We'll be right back. The Aleut Community of St. Paul in Alaska is trying to put itself on the map with a new idea. Aleut was just awarded an Economic Development Administration STEM grant. This is a highly competitive. In fact, there's only 7 awards nationwide. The training is designed to prepare community members for jobs. Some of those jobs are drone pilots, private, commercial, small aircraft, fuel handler, and hazmat training. We are joined today with Dylan Conduzzi, who's the project manager for the Aleut Community of St. Paul Island Tribal Government under the Department of Business and Economic Development. ACSPI is a federally recognized Alaska tribe located in the Bering Sea off the coast of Alaska. Welcome, Dylan.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
When you were taking the needs assessment in the community, were you shocked to find that education was the main need and want?
Not at all. Education is very important to the community. The capacity for education on site during the needs assessment and at that time was fairly limited, basically limited to K through 12. A good chunk of students go off-site for either their high school education or post-secondary education. And so given those basics, it made a lot of sense to me that education would be a priority, and specifically development of education opportunities on site.
How did drones come up?
Well, there's sort of a history of how we got here, so I'll give you the brief version. So back in 2017, we partnered with a company called Advanced Aerial Education, who facilitated a 107 class drone training on site in St. Paul. And just for perspective, the 107 class drones are the smaller drones that most people probably are familiar with. They're the quadcopters. And through that class, our goal was to train pilots on site so they could do work with those drones. Primarily, we use those for monitoring wildlife and environment and doing some survey work as well. But we really wanted to build that capacity within the community as part of economic diversification. So we trained pilots and instructors in that course and put those skills to work on site and also through educating others. Well, that was the beginning of the community's interest in drones, and that was really spurred on by the community's passion for flight. If you look at where St. Paul Island is, it's in the middle of the Bering Sea, pretty far from the mainland. And so flight and logistics is really a point of consideration for that community. And developing some of those capacities on site, I think, is key given that logistical consideration and just the geographic location of St. Paul. From there, I work for the Department of Business and Economic Development. And so guided by the SEDS and guided by the community through the Tribal Council, we look for opportunities to bring investment and economic scale into the community. And so an outgrowth of the work that we did in 107 and drone work was that we identified a company in Saberwing Incorporated, which is a class 5 drone manufacturer, experimental drone manufacturer. So when you think about the different classes, class 1 through 4 drones, the 107 class are the small drones. When we talk about a class 5 drone, it's really the size of an airplane. But what makes it a drone is it's semi-autonomous. And so Saberwing is developing kind of the next generation of aircraft, semi-autonomous cargo aircraft. And we formed a joint venture partnership with them in 2018. So that really is what led us to expanding our interest in kind of this high-tech drone field and what leads us to the interest in the EDA STEM grant.
When you look forward, you see all kinds of way this technology is being used by really all kinds of industries. That opens up a lot of job possibilities for people who want to stay and live in St. Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about the logistics, but for St. Paul, scale of economy is important. I think this is true not only for St. Paul Island and the community there, but rural Alaska communities in general, where you really want to look for opportunities to build on the local capacity, local expertise. The best strategy that we found to do that is to partner with external entities, be that Saberwing or for our education side with other universities. And when we look at the capacities on St. Paul, there's a long history of technological expertise and research given the geographic location in the Bering Sea. And so we wanted to build opportunities around that work. A lot of that work previously had gone to, contractors that didn't live on St. Paul. because finding experts on site in fields, STEM-related fields or biological sciences, can be challenging. And so part of our engagement and part of the ADA program is to really build that on site so that individuals within the community can step into these roles as we start to test this drone. And I think that has scale and scope for Alaska as a whole. This class of drone really is designed to kind of, as I said, be the next generation of aircraft. It has a potential significant impact into the airspace of Alaska, which relies predominantly on air travel for its logistics for rural communities. And absolutely, I think there's scale and scope, not only within St. Paul, but Alaska as a whole and in the nation as well.
I'm wondering if the pandemic has changed any thinking on this, because a year ago we always had to go places, and now with Zoom and even drones, we can do things differently.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that actually it's emphasized the need for not only semi-autonomous vehicles, they kind of reduce footprint and operations. There's still a certain amount of human involvement in those operations, but certainly I think the pandemic has brought some specific challenges. And this class of aircraft could meet those challenges in kind of a unique way. Includes a capacity that expands out operations within rural communities and communities in general. But certainly too, when you think about, pilots and man hours and just people in and out of communities, being able to reduce that footprint, I think makes sense when we talk about the pandemic and just in terms of operational costs and things of that nature in general.
What do you see for the next 5 years with this program?
Well, I mean, this program is really geared to give us a good start on the implementation of what we call the St. Paul Experimental Test Range. That's going to be a commercial flight test range. And that test range lives in our Bering Sea Campus and Research Center, which we founded in 2017. And that was through partnerships with Ilisavik College out of Utqiagvik and through the Bristol Bay campus of Dillingham, which is a University of Alaska Fairbanks campus. And basically, those are designed to, that partnership is designed to, as I said, build the education system in St. Paul with the idea of using that and leveraging that education and capacity to diversify the economy. So for St. Paul, as this airframe comes into being, comes into focus, I think there are significant operations that get scaled up from there, both on site and throughout Alaska. But then in general, the capacity that's built through this program and through the campus allows us to start looking at other programs and other operations that we have on site. I mentioned research as one of those operations, that we can start to really build and grow education systems that allow workforce training and development and expand out our workforce and expand out the activities around our workforce. So that's what I see for the next 5 years.
We only have about a minute left, but what other technologies do you see working in this regard?
Well, the Bering Sea is an interesting place. It's sort of parked right in the middle of the intersection with the Arctic Ocean. And there's a lot of technologies, I think, come into play as Arctic shipping lanes open up. I think St. Paul is in an amazing position to be sort of a hub of not only those technologies, but for that region. And we can talk about that in terms of defense or education or research. But I really think that for St. Paul, those are the emerging opportunities. And I think St. Paul is in a great position locally to manifest some of those.
Well, thank you very much, Dylan Conduzzi, for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Indian Country Today's reporter, Carina Dominguez, has been covering the Apache fight for sacred lands for about 6 years. She joins us now to talk about the situation and where we're at. Welcome, Carina.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
So what's the latest development? I know there was a court hearing we had in the newscast today. Where do we go from here?
Right. That court hearing was yesterday. So initially it was scheduled for January 27th. But, the U.S. ended up wanting to kind of push that date back. So it ended up being yesterday. And it was pretty interesting because Wentzler Nosey, who is the founder of Apache Stronghold, he and his granddaughters actually, traveled the distance from Oak Flat to the federal courthouse where the hearing was. They brought a stone, they brought a feather, they brought prayers with them. But there was very emotional testimony by Wentzler and his granddaughter, Naylene. So just take a listen.
It saddens me to the fact that I had to go and get questioned about my religion, about my way of life, and how it is to pray and what it means. And to try to convey that message to the judge so that he can make the right decision.
That's really emotional, Carina. This story has ups and downs, and kind of right now we're on a potential upside. Maybe talk about that for a minute.
Right. So it was recently discovered that they have this 1852 Treaty of Santa Fe that is still valid, is what they're saying. This treaty was signed by the Western Apache people. It was ratified by Congress. So they're saying this still stands. They're saying that this land, belongs to the Apache people. So the Apache Stronghold, they're working with different tribal and, environmental organizations and the San Carlos Apache tribe themselves. They're all working together to try to stop this land exchange, which was pushed through, in 2014 by Senator John McCain back then. I think he had support by Jeff Flake and Kirkpatrick. So there was a few, different legislators that were behind this, but we do have, some members of Congress currently who are trying to stop this from happening with the Save Oak Flat Act. So Senator Bernie Sanders and also Representative Raul Grijalva, they're both working to reintroduce those bills this year.
There's also tools that the administration could be using if they decide to shift course. Maybe what are some of those?
Right. Well, Biden could, reject that final EIS, the Department of Agriculture, they do have that authority. And we do know that Biden has also signed, a number of executive orders protecting, land for other indigenous people. So there's always hope on that front. He did express, interest in helping tribal nations. So I know tribal leaders, here in Arizona, they're looking forward to see what he brings. And especially with, his appointment of Deb Haaland to Interior Secretary, that will be very interesting to see, hopefully, she can get confirmed in there because, tribes are really banking on that.
Sure. Well, you should note the environmental impact statement, the EIS, is a process. And the companies are reluctant to have to go through that entire process again because it represents hundreds of thousands of dollars in investment and law and technical issues. So it's a big deal if they make them go back through that process.
Right. And the other thing that goes along with that, the final environmental impact statement is supposed to be that. It's supposed to be final. So one thing, a caveat that they had in there was, this, plans are changing, this may not be the final version. So, in that event, then this would not be the final EAS. So it remains to be seen what happens there. So we'll continue to follow this story.
And the folks that are at the campground, they're not going away.
No, they plan on staying there. They're very different than some of these other occupations that we've covered here at ICT in the past. They're really emphasizing the spirituality here, the religious aspect here, the sacredness of the land, no drugs, no alcohol. They do want people to, bring their spiritual, with them. And if their spirit is calling them there, that's what they're asking for. That's the kind of person that they want to be there with them.
The other thing that comes out of the Biden administration is that they've said that they're going to use climate change as a framework for their decision making. And this has all sorts of climate impacts as well.
Right. The Center for Biological Diversity, was one of many organizations. I know it was the Sierra Club, the Grand Canyon chapter, along with, other, the Audubon Society here in Maricopa County. There were a number of organizations, local and, regional, but also national that were really against this because of the National Environmental Policy Act. So that's what their lawsuit, there are 3 current lawsuits right now against this copper mine. So that's the one with the environmental groups behind it. So yeah, there's a lot of concerns about, where is this, slurry as they call it, where is this going? Where are these toxic waste dump's going to be. And a lot of it, we're hearing might even be on Gila River. So that is, something else that, we definitely have to keep tabs on there.
The judge Wednesday said he would make a decision soon, did he not?
Right. Yeah, that decision is set to come on Friday, February 12th. So he will be making a decision on the preliminary injunction at that time. That preliminary injunction would stop any work on the mine. Wensler and his family, they believe that currently there is work being done there. They think dewatering has already taken place. He's been living there for a year now. So he's been monitoring the land. He's been surveying, the animals, the plants, the water levels and whatnot. So, based off of what he's seen, they're really pressed to stop it right now.
We'll leave it there. Carina Dominguez, thank you for reporting.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll talk about the Sundance Film Festival. The film festival Sundance was virtual this year. Indian Country Today's Vincent Schilling has the cold, hard facts.
There are a lot of reasons to be excited for this year's Sundance Film Festival. Since Sundance occurs in Utah in winter, I took the advice of festival programmers to recreate the Sundance Film Festival experience in as much ways as possible.
They say it's always freezing in Utah just before the films begin, so I thought I would stay outside for a couple hours and get nice and cold before I go and watch my next Sundance film, just to get the full effect.
I also got my popcorn ready. Anybody else put hot sauce on their popcorn? Even though this year's Sundance was under a bit more constraint due to COVID-19 restrictions, festival creators embraced the online and virtual world and opened on January 28th with a plethora of films, documentaries, and film shorts programs. But what hit me most at Sundance was that every program, as well as the grand opening of the festival, began with a land acknowledgement to the Ute tribe, as well as to all indigenous people.
And I'd like to acknowledge the Ute tribal nation, the ancestral keepers of the land that Sundance calls home.
The Sundance Film Festival had 7 short film programs, including animation, documentary, shorts, and film shorts. Each of the programs have an average of 8 films, and each program was under 3 hours. At the end of each program was also a Q&A section with the filmmaker. Sundance receives thousands of submissions each year, and they selected 50 to play in their 2021 festival. And yes, I watched all 50 short films. I was excited by my accomplishment, and I also reported my top 10 choices in my Native Nerd column. Among my favorite short films were Bombarak, about a father who takes his daughter on a delivery route for a day, Dear Philadelphia, which explores the lives of a tight-knit black community in Philadelphia, Lata, who is a 23-year-old domestic worker in an upper-class home in South Mumbai, Lizard, which follows a day in the life of Juwan, an 8-year-old girl in Lagos, Nigeria, and a hilariously unsettling experiment of kids working in a fictional business town called The Field Trip, and a gay slam poet's passion for her traditions in Hawaii called This Is the Way We Rise by Native Hawaiian director Sierra Lacey. I then dove into feature films and on Saturday joined the online world premiere of Wild Indian with Michael Greyeyes and Choske Spencer, which was directed by Lyle Mitchell Corbijn Jr., the story of 2 Native boys growing up on a reservation that make an impossible choice. And it turns ugly, as both men search for their identity and a way to come to terms with their pasts. The toughest part about the feature films? Deciding what I should watch. I received hundreds of press announcements and had a huge list to pore over on the site. I also had the factor of time. The festival lasted until February 3rd, and I could only watch so many in a few days. I'm human after all. I watched 20 feature films, resulting in 70 films, including the short films, over the course of the festival. Not bad. Films that stick out to me are Rita Moreno, Just a Girl Who Decided to Go For It, a great film about the life of Puerto Rican actress who won the Oscar for her role in West Side Story. But little did I know the intensity and expansiveness of her career. I also loved The Blazing World, a gorgeously done film with fantastic cinematography and a script that walks a tightrope between horror and fantasy. Another standout feature was Judas and the Black Messiah, an incredible film by Shaka King about the story of the civil rights activist and Black Panthers leader, Fred Hampton. Amy Tan, An Unintended Memoir, was a beautiful feature film about the life of best-selling novelist Amy Tan, directed by the late Jamie Redford, a director with a pure heart and vision that I've had the honor to interview in the past. I also enjoyed Sundance virtually using an Oculus. It was incredible. After taking the tutorial, which included throwing virtual airplanes, a laser machine gun, and shaking hands with the happy dancing robot, I was able to access the virtual events, mixed with a virtual crowd, and more. There's a lot to be excited about in this year's Sundance, especially if you're Indigenous. In Virginia, Vincent Schilling, Indian Country Today.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world today. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with another edition tomorrow. I'm Mark Trahant.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.